Dr. Ben Roberts, who is a research director in the Developmental, Capable and Ethical State Research Division, and currently providing a strategic lead on the research. Ladies and gentlemen, HSRC is known for big surveys that inform policy direction in the country. One of those is the Election Satisfaction Survey, ESS in short, which provides scientifically sound evidence on how voters felt about participating in the elections. Therefore, today we present on the voice of the voters. So I will ask you, Prof. Narnia, to come and give the few remarks with regards to the study. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Palesa, and welcome to everybody. Just to emphasize the fact that the Human Sciences Research Council has been in existence for more than 50 years, and we do large-scale surveys, and we've been doing so for a very long time. We've also been working on these election satisfaction surveys as well as voter participation surveys for more than 2 decades. So today we're here to give you the outcome of the voter satisfaction survey, or the exit survey, as some of us would refer to it. I'm just here to give you a brief background before I hand over to my colleague who is leading this research, Professor Ben Roberts. So in terms of the methodology or the background, and this is very brief, we will give you a handout which will give you more information on this. We selected random sample of 300 voting stations across the provinces, and we interviewed 50 voters at each of these stations with over 12,000, just over 12,000 completed exit votes. You will hear from my colleague that there are 2 things that we tested here. We did not ask anybody as to who they voted for as a political party, because this is an impartial survey. We asked about their experience of the voting at the voting station and some questions about before the voting day. And we also asked them whether they believe that this election was free and fair. And probably the most important outcome here was that 95% of South Africans who voted believed that the elections were free and fair. This is about the voices of the voters. It is not about the voices of the people who did not vote. And I will address that once Ben has given you the high-level findings. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to give you a very broad overview of certain aspects of the election satisfaction survey results, speaking fundamentally, as Narnia has indicated, to the voices of voters on the 1st of November. So I'm going to start firstly with views around the general voting experience. We found that 68% of voters took less than 15 minutes to reach their voting station, with 22% taking between 16 minutes and half an hour, and about just short of 10% taking a little longer. On average, 77% of voters waited less than 15 minutes in the queue before having to vote. 15% took between 16 minutes and half an hour, while only 7% waited longer than that. Overall, 86% of voters found the voting stations easily accessible to persons with disabilities and the elderly, while only 7% did not. 96% reported satisfaction with the instructions and signage at the voting stations, while 97% found the voting procedures inside the voting station easily understandable. In terms of the perceived secrecy of the vote at voting stations, 96% of voters expressed satisfaction with the secrecy of their vote. Provincially, this varied between 94% in the Western Cape and Northwest, up to 99% in Limpopo. In terms of political party tolerance during this election, 61% of voters expressed the view that political parties were very tolerant of one another during the 2021 election campaign. 26% said that the parties were somewhat tolerant of each other, and only 7% perceived intolerance. Turning now to views on the overall freeness and fairness of the election, an overwhelming majority of voters that we sampled, 95%, felt that the election procedures were free. Provincially, this ranged between 90% in the Western Cape to 98% in Mpumalanga. Similarly, 94% of the voters are of the opinion that the election procedures were fair. And again, in terms of provincial variation in this figure, it fluctuated between 90% in the Western Cape and 99% in Mpumalanga. Turning now to views on the performance of the Electoral Commission. 96% voiced general satisfaction with the quality of services rendered by electoral staff to voters, with 3% opting for a neutral point of view and only 1% dissatisfied. Provincially, these satisfaction figures range between 93% in northwestern Gauteng and 98% in Mpumalanga and Limpopo. Voters, more specifically, were asked to rate 7 aspects of the conduct of IEC electoral staff at their voting station. Overall, there was a very positive assessment of officials. They rated their officials as extremely helpful, 81%, friendly, 80%, patient, 80%, honest, 79%, professional, 78%, interested in their jobs, 78%, and lastly, impartial, 69%. In terms of safety and security measures at voting stations, 93% of voters expressed satisfaction with the safety and security that was provided at the voting stations. 2% were discontent with such measures, and 4% were either neutral or uncertain. Satisfaction with this aspect of the electoral experience ranged between 89% in Gauteng and 98% in Northern Cape and Mpumalanga. Obviously, the 2021 local government elections were undertaken during the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we asked our voters to assess their views of the safety protocols that the Electoral Commission had put in place. 92% of voters were convinced that the Electoral Commission had done enough to protect voters from COVID-19 at their voting stations. Only 3% were dissatisfied and 5% neutral or uncertain. This varied provincially between 84% in the Western Cape and 98% in Mpumalanga. Interestingly, the percentage of voters that report being vaccinated from our sample is 68%, which is obviously appreciably higher than the national average vaccination rates. This suggests that there was a greater tendency amongst the vaccinated to turn out and cast their ballot on election day this year. In terms of confidence with the vote counting process, 84% of voters were completely or very confident that their vote would be accurately counted. It was 52% completely confident, 32% very confident. Only 1% said that they were not confident at all in the vote counting process. Then an issue which has received much attention in the media, overall confidence or trust in the Electoral Commission. Taking all things to account, 90% of voters indicated that they trust or strongly trust the Electoral Commission in general. So it's 50% strongly trust and 39% moderately trust the Commission. 7% were neutral, 2% distrusting, and 1% uncertain. The HSRC has conducted a number of other nationally representative surveys over the last 2 decades that has shown that trust in the Commission has declined during the 2010s. Yet this decline is to a lesser extent than other political institutions in the country, and it still remains one of the most trusted institutions. Declining trust in the Commission is partly due, we have found, to general disillusionment with the functioning of democracy in the country, as well as the performance of our core political institutions. The other aspect to mention is obviously we are interviewing a sample of voters. So the voters themselves on election day came out of the voting station and when interviewed expressed high levels of trust, which is likely to reflect the actual nature of their positive experience, as we've just outlined. This needs to be compared with the views of the non-voters. And there is where we find significant levels of discontent with democracy, general disillusionment with the political system in the country and core institutions by extension. Those particular aspects of the abstaining voting age public are also linked to views of a range of political institutions, and the INC included. So it is lower amongst the non-voter than the voters. So we can see that 90% of voters were generally trustful of the Commission. So that is something that I think will receive a lot of attention by academics and other surveying outfits in the country. So I'm going to hand back to Narnia. That's a very, very broad overview. I know it's a lot of numbers to throw at you at once. There will be a handout with all those figures documented for your own reporting. So I'm going to hand back to Narnia just to give some final words of conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ben. So now you've heard the voices of the voters, not the voices of myself or Ben or Palesa necessarily, but the voices of those people who gave us their lived-in experience view of what it was like to vote in LG 2021. So Ben has mentioned that we had a low turnout. That is recognized. Some of our other research is pointing to a very disturbing decline in trust in democracy in South Africa. And of course, democracy isn't only about voting, it's about public participation. But this is a reality, and this could be one of the reasons why we had a relatively low turnout. Another issue is, of course, COVID. We've noted that 68% of voters stated that they have been fully vaccinated, which means that people who were fully vaccinated were more likely to go to the voting stations. This may also give an indication of a continued fear of COVID and, of course, the fourth wave that may occur as a result of something like a vote. So we thank you very much for your attention, and we look forward to any questions that you may have, and Palesa will facilitate that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Narnia. I am certain that the document which gives a summary of the findings of the survey will be circulated if it hasn't been already. But I would like to welcome a few questions from the floor, and I'm kindly asking that they be short because I do not think we have much of time left. And yes, we may start. I have noted your hand, and well, if there isn't, it's in the front. I don't know who's the roving mic. Okay. So I've noted the hand on my right. So you may go ahead, ma'am, followed by the lady at the back.
Thank you so much. My name is Teto Mahlakwana. I'm with Eyewitness News. My first question is around the sample determination. So you mentioned that you interviewed the group of people that you did. Can you give us the regional demographics so that we get a feel of where exactly these views are coming from? And my second question is around the determination of the reasons for the voter turnout. We have seen, obviously, the voter turnout decline, with the exception being in 1999 when it spiked. But what is it about this lack of trust in democracy that is so succinct at this particular point that you then make the conclusion that it's one of the leading reasons for that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There, side. Right there. You are fine? Okay. Okay, thank you. Narnia, whilst we wait for other hands, do you mind responding to that?
Great. Thank you for those questions. So The demographics, and I can talk to you a bit later afterwards, is representative of the voting public in provinces and a range of demographics. We also included interviewing, and I think this is something that needs to be emphasized, at certain time points throughout the day. So it's not all done in the morning or midday or late afternoon. We make sure it's stretched across the full voting day, so it captures that. But in terms of the actual sampling methodology, it's designed to be representative of the registered population at different voting stations and provincially. So we can go into more detail about that afterwards. But I think really the second question about the reasons for turnout, and I think that's crucial. We did ask questions in the survey and even our pre-election surveying that we did about this issue. Firstly, just to say one of the biggest reasons for planned abstention is not about operational issues. It's not about the IEC and what it's going to do at the voting stations. It's fundamentally, and it's about just shy of 80%, refer to aspects of disillusionment as the primary motivator for not wanting to turn out. The second aspect is we did ask some basic questions in the survey about some of the main factors that led to voters that we interviewed turning out. Issues around sense of civic duty is still quite strong amongst the South African public. Issues also of a sense of my vote makes a difference, also quite strongly present amongst the public. Secondary issues are about issues that speak to an appeal to try and get the parties to speak to particular needs. And that includes issues such as services and improving services, issues such as economic improvement, and issues about community-based change. So there are some aspects that's really about the nuts and bolts of democracy, trying to promote fundamental change on the ground in people's lives. So it's a combination, but loyalty, so one of the issues we have talked about in past elections is a sense of party allegiance. That is there, but it's only mentioned by about 1/5 of the voters we surveyed as a primary factor behind them turning out. We also, from our other surveying, have seen that sense of allegiance, that party loyalty, is weakening, particularly across generations. So younger voters are increasingly interested in what can a party do for me? What issues do you represent? So they're becoming more inclined to think about be a so-called issue voter and worrying about that. So, thank you.
Narnia, are you going to take a jab or should I go to them?
No, perhaps just to emphasize that disillusionment was mentioned as a reason for not wanting to vote in our previous survey, which was the pre-election survey. Although the nature of this disillusionment wasn't probed deeply, so we will probably have to do more research to determine the nature of the disillusionment, although we are very well aware of the fact that people are dissatisfied with service delivery, especially at local government level.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to take your question and followed by my right hand. And you may go ahead, sir.
It's Maseko here, Maseko Rahlaka from ENCA, on this side.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry I had not noted you, but you can go ahead and then I will refer the mic back to the gentleman and to you.
Okay.
So you may go ahead.
I just wanted to quickly find out, was there any attribution in terms of the low voter turnout? Was there any attribution to it being a long weekend and a payday long weekend?
Thank you. You may go ahead.
My name is Inayat Wadi, Salam Media in Johannesburg. Just looking at the sample size that has been selected, and we're talking about 300 voting stations, does that give us a level of comfort and to place reliance on a sample of 300 voting stations?
And then this side, thank you. So there are 3 questions, and then I will ask you, Ben, and Narnia to respond before I open up for more questions. Thank you, ma'am. You can go ahead.
Hi, Gatandra from the Mail and Guardian. You say, Dr. Roberts, that trust in the IEC is around 90%, if I'm correct. And you also say that trust in the Commission has declined to a lesser extent than other political institutions. What are these political institutions? Are you talking about Parliament or political parties? And in terms of the decline, what are you comparing it to? And what were the numbers in those surveys? Thank you.
Go for it.
Thank you very much. So I will start with the question about. Low voter turnout. We didn't ask it in the survey yesterday, but in our pre-election surveying that we've done over time, we do ask about preferences for when one would want to have the election day. And there is a strong preference for it being either on a weekend or a public holiday. So those are very strong, consistent preferences over time that we've found. So there is a real preference for that. So that's all I can really say about that it is something that the public, the voting age public really does appeal to in terms of determining when to host the election day. On the sampling question, I just want to emphasize that this is an extremely large election day survey by international comparative standards. The sample through the sampling design is designed to represent the 23,000+ voting stations. So we are confident about that. The 12,000+ voters means that we have a very low margin of error on the kind of percentages which I reported on. So we are very confident that this is a fair reflection of the voices of the voters countrywide, and the findings are broadly comparable to what we've found over successive election surveys that we've conducted over the better part of 2 decades. Turning to the Mail and Guardian's question, the trust figures, we look at quite a range of different institutions, both political and social. The ones that I was particularly referring to was comparison to the different spheres of government, so national, provincial, local, as well as Parliament and political parties and politicians. So we've seen a real collapse in confidence in the spheres of government over time, but particularly the executive and the legislature. So both national government and Parliament, we've seen very dramatic decline in confidence during the 2010s, but the actual start of the decline began in around about the mid-2000s. The IEC has declined, but as I said, if you look at the relative gradient of that change, it's been much sharper for national government, for the Parliament and others. Even amongst political parties, it's barely 20% now express confidence in political parties, and it's even lower amongst politicians. So there has been fundamental decline, and the IEC is more than double that figure. So the confidence in the Commission. So it remains a lot higher, and the change relative to other institutions has happened. There has been decline, but not as severe.
No, I just perhaps a little bit of a naughty statement just to emphasize what Ben has just said about trust in political parties and politicians being under 20%. That might be one of the reasons for disillusionment in general.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Narnia and Ben. I suppose I'm taking the last round of questions. So if you have any burning question, this is your moment. So I'll take a question from the front and gentleman at the back. And is there any question from? So I suppose we have 2 questions, and those will be the last round. Thank you.
My name is Rory Sang. I'm from the Citizen newspaper. The Research Council had previously reported, I think several times in their research, that those that are willing to vaccinate is because they have trust in government. Now, since we have a 68% turnout of fully vaccinated people, did some of these respondents mention any trust in government? Did they mention reasons why they're queuing because they do have trust in government? Is there a link between that vaccination survey and the turnout of the voters? Thank you.
My name is Kaya Gogo from Mail and Guardian. To know, sorry.
Pardon me, we can't hear you, sorry.
Sorry about that. Kaya Gogo from Mail and Guardian. Has the council quantified the percentage margin of error for the study? And are you willing to share that? Thanks.
Those are the only two questions you can go for.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I'll start with the question from the citizen. The work that we've done collaboratively with the University of Johannesburg Centre for Social Change has looked at issues about willingness to vaccinate during the course of the pandemic. And you're correct, it did show that trust in government and trust in our leadership does have a very strong influence on that willingness to vaccinate. In the context of the survey yesterday, we didn't directly test that. The one thing I will say is we did research in July around COVID-19 and elections. And that particularly showed that there was a strong expectation amongst the voting public to get vaccinated before the election. So I think that might be a particular issue that is part of the factor. We've seen the rollout has started well, but it has tapered off the vaccination rates. And I think what we're seeing is that the expectation of having been vaccinated hasn't been fully realized in time for the election, and that might partly explain why we are seeing a greater proportional share of our voters reporting that they have been vaccinated. Oh, sorry, and then to the Mail and Guardian's question, yes, we're happy to share with the margin of error. It is, because of the large sample size, 12,000, it is really small, smaller than the average sort of national sample of a few thousand. So I'm happy to share that with you after this this briefing. Yeah. Thank you.
Where are you going? You good? Okay. Thank you very much, Narnia and Ben. So this concludes our media briefing. So I would urge those of us who are in attendance that we go through the document that was shared that captures the summary of the study. However, for further details on the study, you can also contact Professor Narnia Bohler Muller and Ben. Their details are listed at the back of the document. And for any other media-related queries, Mr. Adziliwine Matandani will be available to guide us on that. On behalf of the Human Sciences Research Council, I would like to thank you very much, and thank you very much to the IEC and the media present today. Have a good day. Thank you.